The Visconti Homo Sapiens is often considered to be one of the distinctively holy grail fountain pens among many fountain pen enthusiasts. I made a video about it way back in 2015, shortly after we first started carrying the Visconti brand, and they've made enough changes to it now that I felt it warranted a refresh. Now, there's a lot to talk about regarding this pen, so enjoy this in-depth look at the Visconti Homo Sapiens. Now, the Homo Sapiens originally released nearly 2 decades ago in the lava material, and it's the only fountain pen that I can think of that's made of basaltic lava, actual volcanic rock. This rock is harvested from Mount Etna in Sicily, made into a powder, and then mixed with resin to give it a very unique texture for a pen material. It's slightly hygroscopic in nature, meaning that it tends to absorb moisture from your fingers as you hold it, giving you a more secure grip than you would get with a normal resin pen. It's similar in that way to ebonite. If you're familiar with that material, it's more of a rubbery type material. This is incredibly durable and feels slightly warm to the touch. And Visconti's expanded upon this lava material, especially in some of the limited and special editions in the Homo Sapiens, a lot since I made my last video. So here are some of the color and material options that they've had in recent years. Starting out with the Bronze Age, this is the classic one and the most iconic of the model with the lava body and the bronze metal trim. This has been my personal favorite. You have the Dark Age, which is black. It's got the lava body, but it's got blacked out trim and ruthenium nib, which looks really slick. You get the Magma, which is like this red and black combo. It's kind of like the Dark Age, but instead of black trim, it's got some red. It looks really cool. You have the Crystal Dream. Now this has got the lava body and the trim like the Bronze Age, but it's got this really large ink window, so you can see what's going on inside. You can check on your ink level, which is super cool. And there's a dark crystal version that's similar, but it's got the blacked out trim like the Dark Age. And then they released the Lava Colors, which is some of the same lava material, but with colored resin. These weren't quite as popular as the classic lava, but it's cool to see them trying new things with a very popular material. Now, Visconti actually expanded outside of lava too, most often in their limited and special editions. You have their Demo Stones and the Amethyst, Mandarin, and Garnet. This shows more of a colored demonstrator version of the Homo Sapiens, which helps you enjoy the visual of the filling mechanism and get to see the ink kind of sloshing around inside, a little more vibrant colors as well. And they've released several limited editions on a somewhat of an annual basis, like the Arizona Sunset, Blue Lagoon, and the Tuscan Hills. They've expanded on the classic Bronze Age and created the Travel Edition limited edition. This has got a matching kind of jazzed up traveling inkwell that's made out of that lava as well. Then you get the limited edition Dual Touch Camouflage. This is a metal and leather that they came out with. It looks pretty wild, and it's got quite a substantial feel in the hand. And with all these different designs, they've used a variety of trim materials, more than you see on a typical fountain pen model. We've seen accents made of bronze, rhodium, yellow gold, rose gold, and black PVD with some ruthenium nibs. They've done a lot of cool things on the Homo Sapiens model. All right, so let's talk about how the pen fits in the hand. So the shape and grip on all these different Homo Sapiens are more or less the same. You get this really nice kind of evenly contoured grip, which I personally love. Now the threads are going to be a little bit chunky because you get that hook-safe lock mechanism in there, but it's a worthy trade-off, I think. The balance and the feel, these are very well balanced when they're unposted, but they're a bit back heavy when posted because the pen's pretty long, and some of them get a bit on the heavy side. With my large hands, the Homo Sapiens size is pretty well perfect for me, especially uncapped, with no posting. I could see it feeling a bit large for those of you with particularly small hands, but overall I think this pen is generally pretty regarded as a comfortable pen to hold. The grip has a nice contour and it's not going to slip around a lot, especially the lava versions. The only thing I don't love so much is that these threads do get a bit chunky, but that's because you have that hook-safe lock. It's a worthy trade-off though, and I love this threading system. You only need to turn the cap about 1/5 of a rotation to cap and uncap it, which is not something you see. Typically, you're more into like a full rotation or maybe a rotation and a half on most other pens. Now the clip is going to have the Visconti bridge clip, which is modeled after the Ponte Vecchio Bridge in Florence. And it's going to look, largely similar in its shape, though the specific logo and enameling and stuff like that might be on it is going to vary from pen to pen. But it's very practical, it's spring-loaded, and feels really good. It's one of my favorite clips. You're going to have the Visconti logo in the finial on the cap, and sometimes these are removable, sometimes not. And it has their My Pen system, which allows you to swap it out if that's something that you're interested in, if you wanted to have, you know, a gem or a stone or something like that in there. So these pens are a little bit heavier, and they do vary depending on which material. Starting out with the resin versions, you tend to have more like 39 gram overall weight, all the way up to that dual touch, which is 87 grams, which is quite a chunker. But that classic bronze and dark age, you're at 42 grams overall. It's heavy, but not as heavy as you might expect, hearing that this thing is made of lava. But the body of the pen, assuming you're not gonna write with it posted, it's only 26 grams, which I find is very, very reasonable for a comfortable kind of long form writing pen. So let's talk about these nibs, because this is one of the things that's probably changed, you know, more than most of the other features on the Homo Sapiens since my last video. So previously they were using a 23 karat palladium nib. It's a precious metal, very similar to gold, but it was kind of neat. They called it the Dream Touch, and it was kind of what they were known for. Well, they ended up switching to German-made Bach 18 karat nibs around the 2020-ish time frame, but it was kind of like a rolling change, and then they were transitioning to making their own nibs in-house. So Visconti now has 14 and 18 karat nibs that I think they're pretty much fully transitioned over to, that are ones that they're all making. So Dream Touch is a thing of the past. Bach, not so much anymore, though some retailers may still have some older pens that have that, but I think everything coming out now has got their new in-house nibs. Taking a look at the nib, you got the Visconti name, a little bit of flourishing. It's very pleasing, very kind of distinctive to their brand. It definitely looks like a Visconti nib. Now the plating on the trim and on the nibs, it's gonna vary based on the exact model variation since they have so many different ones, but it's most likely you're gonna have some form of, you know, rhodium, yellow gold, rose gold, or ruthenium on these nibs. But the underlying metal on all of them is either going to be a 14 or 18 karat gold. Now their nib size options, they've kept constant. So they have extra fine, fine, and medium on pretty much everything. Broad, you see more double broad every now and then, though it's less common. And then their stub is a 1.3 millimeter, which they're kind of unique for that. They're one of the only ones that had that. It's a bit wide for my taste, but a lot of people like them. So, you know, it's I find it to be a bit tight to fit on certain size ruling, so you need a larger ruling paper with that stub, but it still is a, you know, a fan fave. All Homo Sapiens have some form of power filler or a vacuum filler that you might hear it called in other brands. In general, these are going to work really well for holding a large ink capacity and for transporting really well. They make two versions of this, and they use different ones depending on which Homo Sapiens we're talking about. They have a single and a double reservoir power filler. So pay attention to which model you're looking at, because there is kind of a big difference between the two. The single reservoir power filler, vacuum, is what you're going to see on classic variations like the Bronze Age, the Dark Age, and it's going to have a 1.5 milliliter ink capacity, which is honestly pretty decent. It's as good or better than most piston filling pens that you're going to see. Its components are going to be made of titanium and resist corrosion, last a long time. Just for perspective, if you have a Lamy 2000, that's 1.35 milliliters. Double reservoir power filler is where it really stands out. And you see these on a lot of the limited edition Homo Sapiens. It's a little more expensive to make, but it's a little more unique too. The ink capacity on the double reservoir power filler is over 3.5 milliliters. So it's quite a jump up, more than double what you get on the single reservoir. And what's cool about this is you have, you know, basically the equivalent of an entire cartridge's worth of ink that fits in the, you know, front reservoir towards the grip end of the pen. So you don't need to unscrew and, you know, let ink down like you do with all other vacuum fillers. When you have that double reservoir, you can basically get a whole cartridge's worth of writing without having to mess around with the knob. And then when you do need to write with it, you just kind of let it down. So it keeps that largest part of the ink capacity sealed up for when you're traveling, especially if you're flying, and changes in pressure and altitude and stuff. Keeps it pretty well sealed. All right, so let's talk about how these nibs write. In general, if you're familiar with the Dream Touch nibs, I think they're not quite as soft as those Dream Touch nibs, but I think they're still very respectable. Pretty much if you're familiar with most other softer writing 14 and 18 karat nibs, you're gonna feel some of that with these. You're gonna get some springiness, a little bit of line variation in its width if you are pressing down on the nib. It's fairly wet, fairly consistent, pretty consistent with what you see with most other Western, you know, nib sizes in gold nibs. Well, I know the Homo Sapiens is one of those pens that gets talked about quite a bit. I've been a fan of it, and there's a lot of different variations, and so it's a pen that's really kind of stood the test of time at this point. I hope this video is helpful to you in refreshing the original one, because again, there were a decent number of changes and some new models they came out with that I thought were worth pointing out, but you may still have questions, and there's undoubtedly going to be new variations that they'll come out with. So be sure to check out gouletpens.com and see what we have new going on in the Homo sapiens ecosphere. And then if you have any questions or anything, you can reach out to our team at Goulet Pens, or you can just ask in the comments and we'll see if we can help you out. Hopefully this was helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and right on.